Hello student, in this video we will discuss about the Arnold and his criticism, main criticism by Mathew Arnold. I have posted several videos of Arnold before, earlier also, but on different topics. So this is basically on his world criticism. So let's start the video. So first we will know about what is Victorian era. Where Victorian era was characterized by an extended period of peace and strict code of social conduct, and it took place mainly during the reign of Queen Victoria from about 1837 to 1901. So the Victorian comprises were the combination of the positive and negative aspect of the Victorian age, the expansion, great technology, communication, the colonial empire means middle class, poverty, injustice, starvation, slums, working class, and these are the characteristic of Victorian era. So Matthew Arnold, born in 1822 to 1888, his period was tenure, and the critical power is of lower rank than the creative. It is undeniable that the exercise of a creative power, that a free creative activity, is the highest function of a man. The critical power and the object as in itself is really is. So he quoted this in the function of criticism. So let's look on the quick biography. He born in Lillehammer, England, and died in Liverpool, England, at the age of 65. And he is Her Majesty Inspector of School, nationality British, and he is in the Victorian period. And his genre were basically uh, literary, social, and linguistic criticism. And spouse is Francis Lucy. So the Matthew Arnold is the first critic who produced scientific conception of reading. He initiated the formal criticism in poetry. He is the most influential of the Victorian critic, has been characterized by David Dyches as the great modern critic, and he deplored, found unacceptable the lack of form and authority in the centrality of excellence in the literature of their age and within their criticism. Each has sought to be established critical standard which would be valid independent of time and space. Arnold fought against the Romantic theory of criticism with its emphasis on the mind of the poet and the psychological patterns which prevail in the given work, and thus stressed the need to see the aesthetic object as a thing independent of the mind of its creator. And he influenced not only T.S. Eliot but a number of other 20th century critics, among whom living Irving Babbitt, Paul Elmer More, F.R. Lewis, and Lewin Train stand out. In the study of poetry, Matthew Arnold wrote, more mankind will discover that we have to turn poetry to interpret life for us, to console us, to sustain us. Without poetry, our science will remain incomplete, and most of what now passes us for religion, philosophy will be replaced by poetry. So, poetry must have high seriousness, it must be criticism of life, it must exhibit the application ideas of life. All of this is asking a great deal of poetry, perhaps asking more than it is capable of accomplish. To expect that poetry will take the place of religion, even of what now passes for religion, is to place upon the poet an intolerable burden. Yet the question of religion is one that goes straight to the center of Arnold poetry and of his intellectual and religious predictor. So when we talk about Victorian criticism, art and morality, art for life's sake, Carlin and Ruskin, their moral point of view should be the benchmark to judge the work of literature. Art should be for the betterment of life. And art and aesthetic pleasure, it means art for art's sake. Walter Pater and Oscar Wilde, aesthetic and artistic delight should be the benchmark to judge the work for literature. And art should be for delight and pleasure of mankind. These are the deeper steps in the Victorian age to provide the large major step in the advancement of English critical theory before 20th century means establishment as a scientific and methodological discourse. And it is also true to assume that Victorian criticism represents the transition or to culminates in the modern literary theory and criticism. So there is the diversification of the critical system in the Victorian age. As a result, massive presence of different critical voices belonging to both professional critic like John Ruskin, Walter Potter, Matthew Arnold, Henry James, among other. They are critic focusing on art and literature as well as and providing critical commentary on criticism. The literature of the Victorian age entered a new period after the Romantic revival, and the literature of this era was preceded by Romanticism and was followed by Modernism or Realism, and as it has also been called a fusion of Romantic and realistic style of writing. Though the Victorian age produced two great poets, Alfred Tennyson, Robert Browning, and the age is also remarkable for the excellence of its prose. However, the contribution of Mathew Arnold should be also not be forgotten. So he also been called as forgotten Victorian, as it is certainly true that his poetry much less read than that of two great contemporaries like Tennyson and Browning for their vast productivity. And after the publication in 1967 of New Poem, when he was only 45, he wrote very little poetry. He turned more and more prose and increasing fame of critic of literature and of society soon to drove his poetic achievement into the background, so that no modern reader he is familiar of. Only yet few stand in anthology beaches such as Dover Beach and Scholar Gypsy. He was quite aware of the limited audience which poetry appealed to write poetry high quality of both content and craftsmanship that he demanded of himself, as he actually turning oneself into pieces. Moreover, his position as an inspector, he did not allow him time to read in needed for the writing of. So he knew that he lacked many qualities possessed by Tennyson and Browning that made them so widely popular. And Browning's intellectual vigor, Tennyson musical skill, he's not capable of strength affirmation of maybe later Browning or of final struggle to faith. He had only Greek elite mode, and this was not calculated to make a writer popular in 19th century in England or America. There were Browning Society everywhere, into his English speaking board, and the Tennyson became the national institution and Arnold ignored except by an intellectual level. So he, as a critic, his turn gave critic put down to certain ideologies of criticism, and criticism is not come from a branch of philosophy. According to him, it was even a craft and form of art and art of judgment. He says that this. And the craft criticism must be dissemination of ideas of unprejudiced and partial effort to study spread the best that is known to function thought in the world is what Matthew Arnold says in his essay Function of Criticism at the present time. And he says criticism is nothing if it is not related to life. So, is a criticism of literature, society, politics, and religion all tend towards being a criticism of life. And after Aristotle, he was the only one who set rules about criticism. His input toward English criticism was phenomenal. He mentions here some points in the study of poetry, and means in the future poetry is immense because the poetry are raised as time goes on, and we will find even surer stay. And there is not a creed which is not shaken, but for poetry the idea is everything. He's mentioned that everything in the form of in the study of poetry. He said that poetry interprets life in two ways by having natural magic in it and moral profundity. And to achieve, poets must aim a high and excellent serious in all that he writes. His demand to essential qualities. First is the choice of excellent actions, and second is essential what Arnold called is the grand style, the perfection of form, choice, in words. He also mentioned touchstone method, which I have already described in the earlier videos, which is introduced scientific objectivity to critical evaluation by providing comparison analysis as the two primary tools for judging individual poets. On its fallacy of real estimate, he makes reader aware about the fallacy judgment and his view of the historic, the personal, and the real. He writes that in reading poet, the sense for the best the is the really excellent and the of the strength and the joy to be drawn from it and should be present in our mind and should govern our estimate of what we read. He says this Chaucer and he praises Chaucer's excellent style and manner. He appreciated Dryden and Pope, and he's got regarded by Arnold. He's a glorious founder, and Pope is as the splendid high priest of the age of prose and reason. He says on Thomas Ray, he considered Gray to be the only classic of the 18th century. He's constantly studied and enjoyed Greek poetry, thus inherited in their poetic point of view. He mentioned these several points on Robert Burns, and he's praised Shakespeare as well. He needs a miracle of genius like Shakespeare, and he called Shakespeare as a genius. These are some quotes by Matthew Arnold. He suggests these quotes. So I hope you like the critical point of view of Matthew Arnold. So please like and subscribe and share my channel. Thank you so much.